In February 1943, the Germans were defeated in the Battle of Stalingrad, which claimed nearly 2 million casualties. The Russians would soon be advancing into German territory. As far as the German resistance was concerned, the time for talk was over. The time to act had come. On March 13, 1943, Operation Flash was put into motion under the direction of Colonel Henning von Tresckow, who was stationed on the Eastern Front. Tresckow was both an officer and an intellectual, one who strongly believed that Hitler needed to be assassinated by a German. His immediate superior, Field Marshal Gunther von Kluge, was also supportive of the resistance, but was inclined to be more cautious.
1943 wurden dann glückt es dem Tresckow, dem 1A der Heeresgruppe, Hitler an die Front zu locken. Weil es viel leichter war, ihn an der Front, wo der Sicherheitskommandant geringer war, wie im Führerhauptquartier zu ermorden. Offiziere dieses Regimentes und des Heeresgruppenstabes sollten beim Mittagessen im Casino Hitler umschießen. Im letzten Moment untersagte Kluge das Attentat und es unterblieb.
Frustrated by Kluge's lack of nerve, Tresckow had a backup plan. With the help of his cousin, First Lieutenant Fabian von Schlabrendorf, he managed to smuggle 2 bottles of liqueur containing bombs onto Hitler's plane, just before the return flight. Unfortunately, the cold temperature inside the plane's storage area prevented the bombs from detonating. 8 days later, on March 21st, intelligence officer Colonel Rudolf von Gersdorf was scheduled to guide Hitler through an exhibition at the Zeughaus in Berlin.
And Gersdorf volunteered to blow himself up with Hitler. Unfortunately, Hitler raced through the exhibition at breakneck speed. He was in and out in 2 minutes. And that was too short for the fuse to be detonated, so that this attempt also failed.
1 year later, 2 more attempts were made on Hitler's life. One involved Captain Axel von den Busche. The second was to be carried out by Lieutenant Ewald Heinrich von Kleist, whose father was also a member of the resistance.
Und dann gab es auch Planungen, Hitler bei Uniformvorführungen ums Leben zu bringen, indem die Offiziere bereit waren, Sprengstoff am eigenen Körper zu tragen und sich dann mit diesem Sprengstoff in der Nähe des Führers in die Luft zu jagen. Alle Versuche dieser Art sind gescheitert. Zum einen deswegen, weil Hitler die Vorführungen der Uniformen entweder absagte oder aber frühzeitiger verschwand.
Hitler's erratic schedule made further assassination attempts nearly impossible. Increasingly paranoid, he began to confine himself to his headquarters for his own safety.
The security organs around him, especially the SS, made it very difficult for people to get close to Hitler. The assassination plots that occurred over the years point to another element as well. Hitler seemed to have Satan's luck. He was able to avoid being assassinated.
With time running out and with casualties mounting, members of the military resistance even sought help from the ever-advancing Allies.
The German resistance, from quite early on, from the late 1930s onwards, made strenuous and repeated efforts to try and alert the Allies, particularly in Britain, to the fact that there was a resistance. Some of them had very good contacts to people in Britain, quite senior positions. Adam von Trott, for example, had studied at Oxford and had a lot of British contacts. These, on the whole, were not successful. I don't think the Allies took them particularly seriously.
The resistance, at the same time as they were discussing the possibility of overthrowing the regime and making peace, they were also leading, many of them, the invasion of 5 neutral countries in a row. So the resistance, in effect, discredited itself And nobody thereafter, outside Germany, was prepared to believe them.
With little option but to keep fighting a hopeless war, and with civilian casualties and atrocities mounting, the military resistance sought new leadership, someone who could bring focus and momentum to their desperate cause. His name was Lieutenant Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg.
Klaus von Stauffenberg was a family member of a very old noble family from Württemberg. His father had been the Lord Chamberlain to the last king of Württemberg, and he was a devout Catholic, and he grew up in the royal palace in Stuttgart and the family castle in Lautlingen. And so he was really a part of this monarchical tradition.
Hat eine ordentliche Schule in Bamberg besucht, Humanist von der Ausbildung her, das heißt, er hat Latein gelernt, er hat Griechisch gelernt, er hat sich mit Geschichte und Philosophie beschäftigt. Und er war sicherlich nicht das, was man in Deutschland damals nannte, ein kommissiger Typ. Das war er sicherlich nicht. Er war sicherlich durch und durch Soldat.
As students, Stauffenberg and his brothers Berthold and Alexander were fans and followers of the acclaimed poet Stefan George. George had advocated a German government based on high ideals and intellectual excellence. And members of his inner circle, which included Stauffenberg, even called themselves the Secret Germany.
It was a very, very tight-knit group, and they believed in restoring a morally driven Germany in the Central Europe that would be a sort of moral and intellectual, cultural powerhouse for Europe.
Raised in military tradition, Stauffenberg had joined the German Army's 17th Cavalry Regiment in 1926, when he was 18 years old. 4 years later, he had risen to the rank of lieutenant and also became engaged to his future wife, Nina. Married in 1933, they quickly began to raise a family.
Oh, it was great fun. He was loving. He was a very gay person who laughed a lot. I mean, we were raised quite strictly, as it was common at the time. And, of course, he was part of that system. But we never minded, and we loved him very much.
The moral forces driving Stauffenberg were unusual and unusually powerful. He considered that the German army was being corrupted by Hitler and Nazism. They were forcing or leading the German army to massacre civilians, to carry out atrocities against Jews and partisans and so on.
And he said so in 1942. He told several people that the killing of the Jews made the war monstrous and that Hitler must be removed. In fact, he talked to so many people, so much about Hitler, that things were becoming a little uncomfortable for him in Germany. In any case, he had been a staff officer for a long time and wanted a front-line posting.
In 1943, Stauffenberg was promoted to lieutenant colonel and sent to Africa, where he joined the 10th Panzer Division under the command of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. On April 7th, while on a reconnaissance mission, Stauffenberg became the victim of an Allied bomber attack. He was left permanently disfigured.
Stauffenberg had been heavily injured, and he had lost one hand and 2 fingers of the remaining hand and 1 eye.
In May, while recovering from his injuries at a Munich hospital, Stauffenberg was visited by his uncle, Count Nicholas von Uexküll-Gyllenband, a commander in the German army. A supporter of the conspiracy against Hitler, he convinced his nephew to join the resistance. Since the generals had not achieved anything, Stauffenberg reasoned, it was time for the colonels to get involved.
Die ältere Generation der Offiziere, wie mein Urgroßonkel, Generalfeldmarschall von Kluge, hat im Grunde nichts getan, um diesen sinnlosen Krieg, als der schon bald zu erkennen war, zu stoppen und sich auch kaum aktiv an dem Widerstand beteiligt. Das heißt, die Treue, der Eid hat für diese Generation offensichtlich noch eine andere Rolle gespielt als für die jüngeren Soldaten. Während die Initiative zum Umsturz, zum Staatsstreich von den Jüngeren, den sogenannten Obristen, ausging.
Returning to active duty in October of 1943, Lieutenant Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg was sent to Berlin to work at the General Army Office, and he was ready to take action.